All right, I'm gonna show you how to take a little bit of money and do a flip deal with it and be more competitive than other buyers out there who have to buy that property at a much lower price to make their numbers work. If you're able to do what we call a leverage flip, you're able to take a lot less cash to acquire a property, cover renovation costs, cover holding costs, marketing costs on the back end like staging and so forth, and then sell that property and make a little bit less profit than if you were to pay cash for the property, but you're making that profit on a whole lot less cash out of pocket. So if you're able to do leverage flips, and this is probably about 1/3 of the 400 or so flips that I've done in the last few years, is leverage flips, because I needed to beat other cash buyers and offer a higher price to be able to get those deals done. And if you're gonna offer a higher price to outbid other cash buyers to reduce your margin, then you got to get some help on that cost of money. In other words, instead of going to a hard money lender to pay 2 to 3 points and then another 12 to 15% interest, which translates, by the way, to anywhere from 30 to 50% of your total profit on the deal, depending on how fat the deal is, I want to sideline those hard money lenders as much as possible. Here's how you do that. And this is going to translate to more deal flow and more profit in total over time, all right? So for example, there's a deal we're working on right now in Poinciana. The exit price on this property, because you always start with your exit sale price on conservative assumptions and then come backwards from there, right? $410,000 is what the comparable sales are saying this property would sell for in the next few months. Now, it actually says it's a little bit higher than that, but we have to be conservative because we know the prices are going down and properties are sitting in Poinciana and there's a lot of inventory. So we had to be real conservative with the exit price. Now, this isn't the learning channel, which means that you're not going to pocket $410,000 minus your costs, because you have sales costs and commissions on the back end, right? After we account for about 4% of sales costs and commissions on the back end, because we're just going to pay a buyer's agent, we have some closing costs, we actually would walk away with $393,000. Now, it's going to cost to buy this property $345,000. And that difference right there is not enough of a margin. This $345,000, by the way, is total cash to do the deal. It's your acquisition costs, it's your renovation costs, it's your holding costs. When we account for our total cost that we have to recover before we can account for profit, then that spread right here is not enough to risk $345,000 that involve a hard money lender, because we're not sitting on $345,000 in our checking accounts, right? So if we have to involve a private money lender or a hard money lender, we got to share a big chunk of that, and then we have to absorb all this contractor risk, market risk, lender risk, then it's not worth this little profit right here between $345,000 and what we walk from the closing table with is not worth doing this deal. Here's what makes this deal worthwhile. If we know that we're going to sell the property for $410,000, let me clear this up, and I didn't have to come out of pocket $345,000. What if we only had to come out of pocket $135,000 to make the same $48K? That makes it worthwhile, because $48,000 is about 35% return on a whole lot less cash out of pocket compared to $345,000 like we just demonstrated. We're still selling the property for $410,000. Here's a zero. We're still selling the property for $410,000. We're still going to walk from the closing table with $393K. Whoop, there's a 3. So now we're going to be making the difference between our cost basis. Still, our cost basis is $345,000. Whoop, $345,000. But we don't have to come out of pocket that much, because here's what we're doing. There's $210,000 of debt on the property. We're going to have the seller keep in place just until we flip this house for the $410,000. That is a whole lot less cash out of pocket that we're going to need to do this deal. So in this particular situation, there is a first mortgage and a solar lien that totals $210,000. We're telling the seller, look, inside of this $135,000, here's what we're covering. We're going to give $20,000 to the seller. That's a cash to play. We're asking them, look, the condition of you getting this $20,000, you got to leave this $200,000 debt in place, but you don't have to leave it in place any longer than we need to be able to flip this property. So we'll cover the solar payment on this debt and the principal, interest, tax, and insurance on the first mortgage until we flip it. So we're accounting for maybe 6 months to be conservative. And then we're going to pay off that solar lien and we're going to pay off that first mortgage at that time. A lot of us who do creative financing know that it's very hard to get sellers to keep their debt in place for a long-term hold, because if we're going to rent the property or pad split it or do a short-term rental, we're going to take the income approach to value or do a loan wrap, and we have to have them keep that loan in place for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 30 years. It's very hard for them to do that, but they'll leave it in place to make 20 grand when they can't sell it otherwise for 6 months or 1 year. So we're able to do a lot of leverage flips this way because the sellers help us out to get this cash at closing. We give them the $20,000 at closing. We also have to reinstate the loan, which is about 48 grand to keep that first mortgage in place. We got to bring it current, right? And then we have some HOA delinquencies and so forth. Total cost to bring all those loans current, to give the seller some cash, to cover closing costs, to cover a holding cost for 6 months because we're making the payment on this debt. We're also covering utilities for 6 months, and we're going to be covering the rehab, which is about $35,000. That total cash to do this deal is $135,000. And when we sell it for $410,000, we're going to clear this debt right here. We take care, we recover our $135,000 cash. So that's all back in our pocket. Our cost basis of $345,000 is done. We make the $48,000 difference, but again, that's a 36% return on our money. If you were making $48,000 on $345,000 total cash, it's way less than that $35,000, right? I mean, you're like at what, 13, 14% return on your money, as opposed to now we're at 35% return on our cash. So this right here is a leverage flip. This is how we structure these, and we use that trust structure so that we can protect the underlying debt, make the seller feel safe, and do more deals with a whole lot less cash out of pocket and get ultimately a lot higher return on our cash out of pocket than if we have to outlay $345 grand in this case to cover that total cost basis.